A few days later, taking advantage of clear weather, Mike embarked on another food search. 25 miles from his home was Welsh Island, known for its vast network of ponds and streams that attracted rich bird species and fur-bearing animals like otters and beavers. Soon, he entered a tributary, which was somewhat shallow. Concerned, Mike measured the water depth, found it acceptable, and continued until he finally found a place to land. A wild duck was running quickly, a prelude to taking flight. It soared alongside another duck, but was shot down by a hunter. Dinner was now secured. Although the duck was dead, the usual procedures followed. The hunting dog grabbed the duck, swaying from side to side, displaying a regal demeanor. Mike had been on the island for several hours. Upon arrival, he entered the woods with his shotgun. There was a clear stream nearby, and following it would lead to its source. He hadn't walked far before he came across a pond, much larger than expected. Along its bank stood a large tree, half of its bark gnawed away, a clear sign of a beaver's handiwork. Mike surmised that the beaver must have been desperate to chew on spruce bark, indicating the presence of an ancient beaver lodge with a thriving population. Beaver pelts could provide a substantial income, and their meat could feed his hunting dog, making hunting beavers a good choice at the moment. The hunting dog was joyfully playing on the icy river surface. Concerned it might fall in, Mike quickly called it back. There was a game trail nearby, likely one of the beaver's paths. Mike decided to set a trap here. He took out a leg-hold trap and after some tinkering, secured it with wooden sticks. The trap was meant to act as a lure. If he caught a beaver tomorrow, he would stay and set more traps. If not, he would move on. For accuracy, he planned to set several more traps in the area. After setting the traps, Mike began looking for dinner. Soon, he saw a few ducks flying by, one of his targets. He shot one down and retrieved it. Now, he needed to find a place to spend the night. There were some public hunting cabins in the area, indicated by buoys hanging from trees. These cabins were available for anyone to use. Upon arrival, Mike noticed bear tracks, suggesting that brown bears also frequented the area. He cautiously opened the cabin door, relieved to find it safe inside. Mike started a fire and began preparing dinner. Once the meat was cooked, he and his hunting dog enjoyed it together. The taste was quite satisfying. As he savored his meal, Mike looked forward to the next day, hoping his beaver traps would bring him a pleasant surprise. The next morning, he woke up and went outside with his hunting dog, only to find fox tracks in the yard. A fox had scouted the area last night. Mike planned to deal with it later. His priority was to check the traps he had set the previous day around the pond and stream to survey the local wildlife. Upon reaching the first trap, a pleasant surprise awaited him. An otter was caught in the trap. His dog sniffed the otter, and Mike noticed a trail of footprints in the nearby snow from where the otter had approached. It was an adult otter, and its pelt could fetch $200. Mike reset the trap and moved on. The fresh snowfall from the previous night made it easy to spot animal tracks, aiding in his trapping efforts. At the sight of the second trap, he found it missing. At that moment, Mike discovered bear paw prints in the snow nearby. It seemed a bear had stolen the trap's catch. Mike was furious. Not only had the bear taken his game, but it had also taken the trap itself. This area was no longer suitable for setting traps, as the bear might return looking for more free meals. Mike still had 6 more traps to check. His mood soon improved when he found a beaver in the next trap. He examined the plump, high-quality beaver, indicating a family nearby since a beaver dam often houses over 10 beavers. After collecting his catch, Mike continued to check the remaining traps, but found no more catches. One trap had almost succeeded. Tracks showed that 3 animals had perfectly leaped over it. Mike decided to adjust this trap to surprise them next time. Back at the hunting cabin, Mike prepared to process the beaver, wanting to skin it before the insides spoiled. He placed the beaver on the cutting board, under the watchful eye of his hunting dog, his most loyal companion. Mike first cut off the beaver's feet, then sliced upward along its belly. It didn't take long for him to skillfully remove the beaver's pelt, securing the $200. Because the island is populated with many brown bears, Mike couldn't leave the beaver carcass inside the cabin, as it might attract these dangerous predators at night. However, Mike still cut off a hind leg to feed his hunting dog for dinner. He also removed the beaver's scent glands, which beavers use to emit odors. Mike planned to use these glands to trap foxes. He tied the glands to a trap and secured it to a fallen tree. Back inside, Mike continued to skin the otter. Skinning an otter is different from a beaver. After opening the tail, he needed to hang it up and carefully cut the skin at the joints to completely remove the pelt. Proudly holding the beaver pelt in one hand and the otter pelt in the other, Mike was quite pleased. These pelts could be sold to tourists or sent to an auction for trading. Securing 2 pelts in one day, Mike had made a promising start. Riding the wave of excitement, he decided to check the fox trap. Several hours had passed since he set it up, and he might have been blessed with good fortune today. Indeed, he found a beautiful red fox, one of the rarest and most valuable types of fur, lying in the trap, far more valuable than the beaver pelt. Mike made a significant decision. He would stay on the island until his small boat was filled with pelts. On the other side, in Montana's Bison Valley, a fresh snowfall disrupted Tom's routine. He took a day off from his trap line. However, his friend Will came over, bringing some materials to make a recurve bow with Tom. If successful, they could sell it for $500 each. Tom, a renowned craftsman, examined the wood. Judging by its curvature, it was a bow only half made, still containing moisture, likely cut when the tree was green. Repairing it seemed challenging but worth a try. Tom poured hot water into a metal pipe and waited for it to boil. He then inserted the bow into the pipe to soften it. Using clamps, he bent the bow further. This process had to be done within minutes. Once the wood cooled, it could no longer be bent. After checking, Tom found the angle slightly off and reheated it. The curvature of a recurve bow is crucial for its power and must be perfectly symmetrical to avoid uneven string tension, which could crack the wood. After a second adjustment, one end reached the optimal curvature. Now, the other end needed similar treatment. He heated and bent it using the same method. After a while, Tom inspected the bow and noticed a minor flaw. He was confident another attempt would succeed. Young Will handled errands, especially critical at such moments. Tom operated carefully, and this time, the result was exactly what they needed. Next, Tom pulled out deer sinew from his pocket, ideal for the bowstring due to its strength and flexibility. He tied the sinew to one notch at the end of the bow and cut off the excess. Then, by bending the bow, he pushed the other end of the sinew into the second notch. With a snap, a crack formed on the bow, leaving them stunned. After hours of work, it seemed all might be lost. But Tom refused to give up. He thought of a remedy using a potion made from buffalo hide scraps, a protein colloidal with strong adhesive properties. Tom evenly applied the potion on the bow and soaked strips torn from a deer's nasal sinuses. He then pasted them one by one onto the bow. Once the glue cooled, it would encase the nasal sinuses, making the bow much stronger. The next day, Tom continued repairing the bow. He wrapped the cracked area with a beaver's tail and secured it with needle and thread. The rest of the bow was covered with rattlesnake skin. Now, a recurve bow was officially made. Tom and Will went outside to test its effectiveness. Tom drew the bow, aimed briefly, and released the string. The arrow hit the target accurately, and the bow's power was confirmed. Satisfied, both men returned home. This is the process of making bullets. Pour hot molten lead into a mold and tap it to fill the space. Once it hardens, the lead balls are plunged into snow to cool rapidly. Here in Idaho's Sawtooth Mountains, Harry and Kid operate their ranch, needing to gather food for the winter. Although there are some cattle on the ranch, they are reluctant to slaughter them. Instead, they focus on American bison, the largest mammals in North America, with an adult weighing up to 1,500 pounds. To save on expenses, they decide to make their own shotgun bullets. Kid pours lead pellets into an iron pot, waits a while, then pours the liquid into molds to produce several round bullets. Now, they are ready to set off. Bison roam anywhere within a 200-acre range, and the hardest part of hunting them is finding them. The two decide to climb to a high peak to observe from above. The mountain path is rugged and dangerous. They must proceed with caution. Nevertheless, Kid nearly falls, but, with quick reflexes and Harry's help, manages a narrow escape. They proceed even more cautiously and safely reach the summit. They begin scouting and soon spot a herd of bison feeding. They spring into action, needing to get within 150 yards to shoot. After moving for a while, Harry signals Kid to stop. There are bison ahead. They hide behind rocks and stealthily peek out. With the bison in clearer view, they start selecting their target. A young bull met their needs. Kid loaded the bullet and took aim. Just then, the bison stopped. A perfect opportunity. Kid fired decisively but noticed the bison barely reacted. He quickly reloaded. However, the bison was now obscured by trees, making it impossible to aim. The bison's movement suggested it was hit. The pair decided to track the injured animal, which was very agitated, requiring them to proceed cautiously, following the blood trail. After a while, they spotted the bison in the bushes. They approached slowly, but suddenly the bison stood up, still alive. Kid hastily fired another shot. The bison attempted to flee, but, severely wounded, collapsed after a few steps. It was finally dead. Only upon closer inspection could they appreciate its massive size, with thick horns, a prime candidate for a dominant bull, now fallen. Butchering such a large animal usually takes hours, and daylight was fading. For efficiency, Kid stayed to butcher while Harry returned to camp for backpacks. The kill attracted many birds. Kid skillfully skinned the hide, which could fetch $2,000 when cured, and the head could sell for $500. However, the real prize was the meat, worth 3 times that of regular beef. As Kid worked, Harry arrived with horses. They began to pack the meat, hanging it on the horses' backs, ensuring it was securely tied. The transport team consisted of 3 camels and a new mule, on its crash course today. With the team ready, they set off, Harry leading, and Kid in the middle. The journey involved navigating difficult terrain, particularly rivers. The horses, already fearless, crossed bravely. The mule, even more courageous, leaped over the river with small steps. Despite this success, challenges remained due to the many streams in the area. The next stream appeared deep, and the timid horses hesitated to enter. Under Harry's urging, they began crossing. The water was manageable, but the mule, being shorter, struggled. As it climbed out, Kid's horse broke through the ice, nearly falling. Fortunately, its strong legs enabled a smooth ascent. The other horses and the mule managed the same feat. They hadn't gone far when another river appeared. The team entered the water one by one, but this river's current was stronger, causing chaos. The young mule, agitated, jumped and lost its load. Harry quickly dived into the water and grabbed a package. Amidst the confusion, the team successfully reached the shore. After taking inventory, they realized they had lost a package and a bison head. The men fished out a bison head from the river, its eyes still glaring like brass bells. It was their own item, not something bizarre produced by the river. Half an hour earlier, during the crossing, the mule's error resulted in the loss of a package and the bison head. They didn't have time to search as they were soaking wet and needed to warm up quickly to avoid hypothermia. They built a fire immediately and removed their wet pants. Seeing Harry in red long johns, they realized why the accident happened. Dressing flamboyantly wasn't necessary. They wrung out their socks and hung them on a nearby tree branch. Once warmed up, Kid tried to recover the lost items. The package contained prime loin meat, too valuable to abandon, and the bison head, worth $500, was also essential. Kid felt something with a stick. To hook it, he fashioned a tool resembling a trident from a tree branch and tied it to a stick with rope. Returning to the river, he began to dig with the stick. After several attempts, he hooked something. He passed the rope to Harry, who pulled hard from the bank. Eventually, they retrieved a package, but it was soaked with water. The 50 pounds of prime beef were at risk. The urgency to return to the ranch increased. Reluctant to leave the bison head behind, they split up to search. Kid quickly found it lying quietly at the bottom of the water. Together, they retrieved it. After securing their cargo, they continued on their way. Once back at the ranch, they moved the packages to the smokehouse and hung the beef on the walls. Smoking had to start immediately. Fragrant applewood would give the smoked meat a special flavor. Soon, thick smoke emerged from the cracks. The smoking process would take several days. Now they needed to deal with the bison hide. The untreated bison hide was very heavy. Together, the 2 men lifted it onto a workbench. First, they had to scrape off the fat. Given the large size of the bison hide, this process took an hour. Tanning the hide required brain matter, which they scraped from the bison's head, mixed with water, and heated to create a thick liquid. They then applied this liquid to the hide to soften it, using an ancient and practical technique. After finishing the application, they prepared to enjoy their dinner. A man had hunted a deer, but since this area was bear territory, he butchered the deer quickly to save time, knowing the blood could attract bears and lead to a dangerous situation. This is Wyoming's Wind River Mountains. Josh, a ranch worker, relies on nature for meat, but the hunting season was ending, and he hadn't caught any game. Today, he floated downstream to a deeper area, scanning with binoculars in hopes of spotting deer in the lowlands, but only saw a few seabirds. The river water was icy this time of year. Josh carefully controlled his canoe to avoid falling in. Just then, he spotted a deer and quickly went ashore, creeping up with his shotgun. The two deer were unaware of the looming danger. Josh began to select his target but soon lowered his shotgun after realizing the deer were not yet adults. Hunting underage game was illegal. Resigning himself, he continued downstream. After a while, he decided to go ashore near some willow trees, a favorite hiding spot for deer. Indeed, his judgment was correct. He found fresh deer droppings on the ground. Excited, he followed the tracks up a slope and spotted several deer, including a mature buck. To close the distance, he crouched and moved quickly to a concealed spot, then took aim. The deer remained in place, and after taking a deep breath, Josh fired decisively, and the buck fell. Josh was breathing heavily, thrilled by the hunt. Now he was eager to retrieve his prize. The deer was well fed and sturdy, providing about 220 pounds of meat. Since this area was frequented by bears, Josh quickly butchered the buck, taking only the essential parts to avoid any trouble. He headed to his canoe to travel another 5 miles downstream to the meeting point. Enjoying the beautiful scenery in high spirits, Josh's smile suddenly froze. The river ahead had unexpectedly frozen over. Bravely, he charged forward, using momentum to slide the canoe over the ice for a meter before it stuck. The ice was thicker than he had anticipated. Josh carefully stepped onto the ice, relieved that it supported his weight. He dragged the canoe across this stretch, then continued to glide along. After another half-hour of sliding, he finally reached the meeting point. His family was excited to see the deer meet. It had been 10 days since the last moose hunt, which could sustain the tribe for a month. However, to get through the long winter, they needed more game. The hunting camp was a temporary home for Martha and her daughter Ellie. Today was Ellie's 12th birthday. Ellie was a descendant of the Athabascan and Tlingit, two of Alaska's oldest indigenous peoples. The bracelet she wore symbolized the Tlingit tribe. With only 1 week left in the moose hunting season, Martha hoped their ancestors would bless them with one more moose before returning to the village. The two decided to head to the marshlands to cover more ground. There was a lake where moose liked to graze by the water. They climbed to higher ground nearby for a better view of the entire lake. Ellie spotted something and pointed it out to her mother. Indeed, it was a moose. To ensure a clean kill, they needed to get within 300 yards. Without hesitation, they moved into position. Moose are temperamental creatures. If they sense an intrusion into their territory, they can charge without mercy. Therefore, Martha and Ellie had to proceed with caution. They set up their rifle in a clearing within shooting range and waited for the moose to show itself. After a short wait, the moose emerged. Ellie took the first shot, hitting the moose's vital area. However, it did not fall but moved behind a tree, out of their sight. They could no longer see the moose and wondered if it had fallen. They decided to go check. When they reached the spot where the moose had stood, they found some blood on the leaves and a deer trail. They slowly followed it and suddenly came face to face with the moose. Martha fired another shot, but the moose, with its strong vitality, continued to stagger away. Out of humanity, Martha needed to end its life quickly to prevent further suffering. Finally, after the third shot, the moose fell down for good. Both felt relieved. This was Ellie's most memorable birthday, and she had now become a skilled hunter. Next was the butchering process. Dismantling a moose took several hours. As night fell, they used the light to help sort and pack the meat into the car before starting their return journey. Tom was preparing to tan a soaked wolfskin into leather. He sharpened his fleshing knife and began removing the fat from the wolfskin. This process was crucial. Only by removing all impurities could the fur be preserved long-term. With over 40 years of experience, Tom was always meticulous to avoid damaging the skin. as a single hole could ruin its value. After finishing the fleshing, Tom stretched the wolf skin over a wooden board as much as possible. While waiting, he prepared to soften the fur using natural softeners from the animal's brain matter. He took a wolf head from a hot pot, finding some soft fat at the center of the skull, which was what he needed. He collected all the fat and then decided to cook the wolf's skull, which could be valuable, selling for up to $200. Tom handed the skull to his wife, Nancy, for the remainder of the task. She needed to boil it, adding baking soda to help the meat separate from the bone and whiten the skull. Timing the cooking was crucial. Overcooking could cause the skull to fall apart. After a while, Nancy lifted the skull to check. Seeing that the meat was separating from the bone indicated it was done. Now she carefully removed the remaining flesh, especially around the teeth, to avoid any scratches. Meanwhile, Tom started the tanning process. He applied the liquid to the wolf skin, carefully covering every corner to ensure the fur absorbed as much substance as possible. After finishing, Tom took the skin outside to begin stretching exercises, making the fur soft. This step was crucial as it determined the softness of the fur, and there was only one chance to get it right. Tom rubbed continuously until his arms ached. Now, it was time for the final step. He used cedar wood primarily for starting the fire. Once the fire was going, he switched to rotting poplar wood, which produces more smoke and gives the leather a particularly nice color. Tom hung the wolf skin above the chimney. 3 hours later, he checked and was pleased with the smoking effect. He took the skin inside, where Nancy had also finished processing the skull. Despite their busy day, they had earned a valuable return and enjoyed the work. This white, curly-haired bull was undoubtedly the fashion icon of the region, but was sadly knocked down by a hunter. Why such a gentle bull met this fate starts with the morning's events on the southern coast of Alaska. A plane was crossing a treacherous rocky area, carrying a pilot and Mike. Mike hadn't yet secured his winter meat supply. Due to a natural disaster last year, the local deer population hadn't recovered, so Mike needed to hunt in a more remote area. On the westernmost edge of these islands lies a special island that was a gathering place for whalers and fur traders over 100 years ago. Some cattle were brought to the island as food for these people. Today, the island is uninhabited, and the cattle have returned to the wild, evolving into a feral herd. Now, anyone can get free beef here. Since the hunting season was over, Mike only managed to secure 1 day of hunting time. Regardless of the outcome, he would have to leave by plane the next day. Finally, the plane landed steadily on the sea, startling some seabirds. The area seemed rich in resources. After saying goodbye to the pilot, Mike set foot on the island. To survey the area, he planned to climb the nearby hillside. On his way, he saw some remnants of bones, clearly from a cow that had died in a slaughter. It seemed that predators also lived in this area. Soon, Mike reached the high ground and began looking for signs of cattle. He hoped to find them near the beach, as dragging the meat from a distant location would be difficult. After some searching, he finally spotted several cattle, further than he had hoped, but he had no choice due to time constraints. He followed the direction of the herd and soon found an isolated bull about 100 yards away. Mike decided to target it. With his rifle, he slowly lay down and took aim. The angle was perfect, and he downed the bull with one shot. By the time he reached it, the bull had stopped breathing. The bull could provide at least 500 pounds of meat. Mike started to butcher the animal quickly, as sunset was just over an hour away. An old man with a sharp saw was cutting through the bull's bones, making a squeaking sound. A plump fox, attracted by the smell of blood, swaggered over, but it dared not approach the menacing Mike. With nightfall approaching, Mike hurriedly butchered the bull. He was more worried about strong brown bears or cunning wolves than the feeble fox. Under pressure, he packed most of the meat. Since the plane wouldn't arrive until the next day, Mike covered the meat with a waterproof tarp, but he couldn't mask the smell, which might attract predators overnight. Mike planned to camp about 100 yards away to protect himself and quickly support if needed. He built a simple shelter with the tarp and wood, then crawled inside to rest. When dawn broke the next day, Mike woke up and immediately checked on the meat, finding everything in order. Today, he needed to transport the beef to the plane's meeting point. Since he could only carry about 100 pounds at a time, he faced the daunting task of making 5 trips. including climbing hills, which was extremely taxing on his strength. Mike stopped to catch his breath, regretting hunting the bull so far away. At this rate, it would be difficult to transport all the meat home today. Time was ticking away, and it took him 3 hours just to complete the first round trip. According to his agreement with the pilot, he could only make one more trip, which frustrated him. Thus, he decided to take a risk by transporting the meat via seawater, but he needed to wait for the tide to come in. This would be his only chance. During this time, Mike had to make some preparations. He took out an inflatable valve and filled it with air. Then he loaded the beef onto the raft, securing it tightly. Pulling the raft with a rope along the shoreline, Mike found it relatively easy due to the buoyancy. The only difficulty was walking in the rocky seawater, but the real challenge came when he encountered steep cliffs. There were no easy footholds, and the impact of the seawater made it tough for Mike. Fortunately, he managed to overcome this perilous stretch. The rest of the journey went more smoothly, and a few hours later, he arrived at the meeting point, albeit half an hour late. The plane had not yet arrived, and just as Mike was getting worried, it finally appeared. Now, he could take his bounty home. Elsewhere, Eustace was carefully maintaining his rifle, preparing for the upcoming hunting season. Winter's arrival meant he needed to hunt for food. He patiently taught Harrison shooting techniques, though the young man's talent was average. After Eustace reminded him of various precautions, Harrison gradually got the hang of it. Next up was his girlfriend Ashley, who had prior shooting experience. Though she hadn't touched a gun in years, her demeanor became authoritative the moment she held the rifle, hitting the target's bullseye twice in a row with remarkable accuracy, leaving Eustace almost in disbelief. Now they were ready to hunt. They changed into camouflage and started searching for game in the woods. The ground was littered with acorns, a sign that many squirrels were likely around. Squirrels, although small, provide tender meat and are a delicacy, perfect for practicing Ashley's shooting skills. Hitting a squirrel tests a hunter's quick reflexes. One squirrel was nibbling on acorns when Ashley took aim. Unfortunately, her first shot missed. Eustace comforted her, saying a single failure was nothing to worry about. They waited, and soon a second squirrel appeared. Ashley fired again, but her expression revealed another miss. Eustace chuckled. This real-life practice taught Ashley that hitting a live target was much harder than a stationary one. Her earlier pride had quickly dissipated. Soon, a third squirrel appeared in the bushes. Ashley slowly approached and hid behind a tree. The squirrel was happily foraging. Ashley decisively took the shot, and this time, she proved herself. Both of them were delighted. This was Ashley's first kill, and she was very excited. Her training session ended successfully, and now it was Harrison's turn. The two sat down to wait. Soon, a squirrel paused briefly nearby, presenting a perfect opportunity. Harrison made a clean shot. Carrying the squirrel, they headed home where the next task was dressing the game. After removing the skin and innards, they roasted the squirrel over a fire. Once the meat was cooked, they eagerly tasted it. The hot, tender roasted meat was delicious. The newcomers were growing to love this free and self-sufficient lifestyle more and more. This was the carcass of an American bison. From the meat scraps left on the bones, it seemed the bison had died no more than 2 weeks ago, likely killed by wolves. This infuriated Josh, a ranch worker responsible for overseeing 400 bison. In a few weeks, the calving season would start, significantly increasing the herd size. For this reason, the ranch owner had purchased nearby land. Josh discovered this scene while digging a water channel. Now that the wolves had tasted success here, they would linger in the area, putting the herd constantly at risk. Thus, Josh needed to take a firm stance to ensure the ranch's peace. However, his immediate task was to conduct an urgent head count of the bison to prevent further losses. He noticed a solitary female bison. Her calf, born last year, was approaching its first birthday. Normally, a mother bison nurtures her calf for just over a year. Therefore, her calf was either the carcass just found or under attack. Josh planned to check from the nearby high ground, which offered a clear view of the ranch. Instinctively, the bison moved together, slowly grazing. After counting, Josh discovered about 20 bison were missing. They might be cornered somewhere, a dangerous situation. North American gray wolves are methodical hunters, working in teams to prey on isolated bison. Now, Josh needed to locate these missing bison. Fortunately, he quickly spotted them moving towards a water source. A robust bull was guarding this small group, alert but relaxed upon seeing Josh. He planned to herd these bison back to the main group. Once done, he intended to track down the wolves. The culprits of the calf attacks needed to be dealt with. The snow clearly displayed wolf tracks, all from large wolves. Josh set up a camouflage on a high ground, then waited for the wolf pack to appear. To attract them, he put a piece of reed in his mouth and mimicked the distress calls of an injured rabbit. This dying sound was an irresistible lure for the predators. Josh was imitating the dying rabbit's call. After some time, a wolf finally appeared, but it was out of shooting range, so Josh didn't make a move. He continued mimicking the rabbit's sound until the wolf changed direction and moved quickly towards him. However, the wolf suddenly stopped, hesitant, perhaps sensing something amiss. But now it was within shooting range. Josh decisively fired his gun. The wolf disappeared into the bushes but had been hit. Josh immediately followed. As night fell, he reached the spot where the wolf had stood and saw some blood on the ground. With the help of these tracks, Josh found the wolf in the bushes, already dead. Wolves are highly intelligent animals, and the death of this one would likely make the pack wary and keep them away from the ranch, which was Josh's goal.